Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us again for another episode of our US Biller series. We're very happy to have you here. I did review our last one just before we got started to make sure I knew where we left off so that we could kind of pick up and try and make it as seamless as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. We've got our nice demo account open, and I am under one of the providers this time with full access so that we have access to everything that we need. But this way we can get into the day view, into the edit billing codes part of the chart, since that's where we wanted to kind of start. I really appreciate all of your lovely feedback and your graciousness over not being able to get into that the last time. So we're going to start there, make sure that we are covering all of our bases. So today is largely about workflows, certainly the capability of the software, but workflows. Often people know how to use Jane, but they're not sure how to use it efficiently and effectively. And that's part of what we want to kind of help provide tools in this webinar series. So pardon me. So that's kind of why we're starting here. We had talked last time about when you open an appointment, you have the ability to enter codes into the purchase from here. So you could enter your billing codes and your ICD codes. A lot of physical medicine practitioners, in fact, I would say there are a lot of other specialties as well that are kind of doing the same thing with their patients, especially if like there's been an injury. You know, I know a lot of chiropractors who are kind of working on the same thing with their patients. So it makes sense to pull codes from previous appointments that would apply again today, especially if, for instance, we have Gertrude as our patient for the day that has all of our examples. And if Gertrude has lower back pain on a regular basis, which, you know, I don't know anybody over 40 who doesn't, you know, it could be that this is exactly what that provider is going to be working with Gertrude on a regular basis. However, without actually checking in with the provider that day, it is hard to say. You're kind of making an educated guess. So like we had talked about, when you're adding the policies, now we already have the policies attached, but we'll kind of choose this little guy down here. Oh, and it doesn't actually have that pull forward. But when you do add the policy, it has a copy previous. So you could pull codes from previous appointments. And that's a great option. However, we like the workflow where we actually know what the provider has done that day. And that's why we're going to look at the chart notes and the edit billing code section. So let's jump into it. So we're going to go to the day view for Dr. Gregory. He's a very busy doctor. And so this is kind of a nice view because one, it only gives your day's schedule as the provider. When you're in your account, it gives your day's schedule. So kind of gets all of the other stuff out of the way. The other provider schedules are not there. Other days are not there. It's just what you've done that day. So let's say, for instance, it's the end of the day and you're doing all of your chart notes. You're going to go ahead and click once on the appointment and it will open the chart section of that patient's account. Now, one of the advantages, in fact, probably the greatest advantage to doing it this way is when we create, now I've actually gone in and created the chart note for today. I wanted to get a little bit ahead so we weren't just doing a bunch of typing in front of you all. But when you do it this way and you add a new chart, which I chose the Kairos subsequent, which is the one right here, it's going to attach it to the appointment. So as you can see by this little symbol, it's attached to today's appointment. And that's important because when we do use that edit billing code section at the bottom, which we're about to get into, and we update those codes, it's going to know, oh, it's going to go to the June 8th appointment, the June 8th purchase. So having that link is crucial for being able to use the edit billing code section. In fact, if it were not linked, so if we were to actually go to, let's just jump over real quick. I'm going to bounce to billing and then I'm going to bounce to patients. And we're going to look up Gertrude. Hopefully I got her name right. Of course I didn't get her. Oh, here, let's do, there we go. There she is. So let's say that you went to the patient's account to do the chart and you added a new chart entry, Kairos subsequent. There we go. And actually, I think I've done it incorrectly because it did actually attach. But let's see if we can find a good example. Of course we can't. I should have had this ready. If you do not see this little appointment fella sitting here, that means it's not actually attached to the appointment. So you would not have access to the edit billing code section. So my point being, if you don't find it, let's go back to our day. Let's click on our fella and let's open the chart note itself. At the bottom, you see this hyperlink that says edit billing code. So if this is not here, and you're like, oh, I can't find the section, the reason is because it's not actually attached to the appointment. And it's a very easy fix. You would just drop the menu down in the header and you would add appointment or attach the appointment. Now you can see here that it actually gives me the option to change appointment or remove appointment. So if I don't want this attached to the appointment for whatever reason, I could certainly remove it and then the symbol disappears. So that's just good to know, because when that happens, you don't have access to the edit billing code. So if you're trying to use this feature, you're like, where is it? That could be the reason why you're not finding it. So let's go ahead and put that back, add appointment. And then we just want to confirm, yes, it is for June 8th. Perfect. And now we have attached to the appointment. You can actually see both of these for the same date of service are attached, but it will only pull codes from one. It'll give you the option to pull from both. I'll show you. We have the hyperlink here. It'll give you the option to pull from here, but it's only going to use one. So if I were to update the billing from this chart note, it'll move the codes over to the purchase. But if I were to go to the other one and do the very same thing, it will override my first action. So you can only have the billing codes transfer from one chart. So I just kind of wanted to make that very clear, because there are cases where providers are using two chart notes on one date of service for a variety of reasons. We won't get into all the reasons, but it is good to know that you would only want to use one of the edit billing code sections for your codes so that you don't have one override the other. Okay, so we have used our day schedule to get into Gertrude's account, into the charts. What's nice is we can also click a second time and it will pull open the appointment window. So I like that, because then you kind of have like a little bit of a view of today for Gertrude. You can see the codes that perhaps were pulled forward from a previous appointment. So that's kind of nice. I like to kind of be able to see everything, and it's nice for the provider to be able to hover over their appointment, any notes that were pulled to the top that were starred. I think we went over that last time. Being able to actually use the notes section and put something in there would show up in the window. So if there's information the provider needs for that day's appointment, they would be able to see it quite easily. So let's get into it. I preloaded some codes into the chart just so that we wouldn't be sitting around doing a bunch of typing. So we've got all of these codes are loaded in. Now, how I put these in was, you want to use the hashtag, or for some of us, the pound sign, and you put in your CPT or ICD codes. Now, the order of the codes in this section, not as important. You can reorder the codes in the edit billing code section. So I just kind of want to put it out there that you could just put all your CPT codes in first, then all of your ICD codes. You could do a CPT with your ICD, however you want to do it. It doesn't matter the order up here. It's going to matter down in the edit billing code section. So we're going to get there in just a second. So there are two ways of going about entering. You use that hashtag with the code. I put in that extra spinal code. But if you're let's say doing an ICD code and you're not sure because you don't have the 500,000 ICD codes memorized, then you could say, okay, well, I know that it was having to do with lower back. So I'm going to just put in the description lower back, and then I'm going to find the code that is associated. So there's two ways. You can either put the code in, or you can put the description of the code in, and it'll give you the list to choose from. So I love that, because obviously not everybody has the entire ICD code or CPT code list memorized. So that's a really great alternative. The most important thing, obviously, is to add that hashtag. Without that hashtag, the system is not registering that as a code to pull down to the edit billing code section. So you do want to make sure that you are actually putting in that hashtag to grab the code so that Jane actually knows, this is a code that I want to put in the edit billing code section. Now, these go in any of the open text fields in the body of the chart. So I've put it under objective notes. You could put it under subjective notes. You could have a text field dedicated to your codes. However you want to do it, it just has to be in a text field so that you can use that hashtag and the code itself. So let's go down to the edit billing codes section. Now I've opened it already, but this is how you would find it to begin with, is it would be just the hyperlink, and you would click on that to open the section below. And then let's go ahead and select, let's have everything unselected. Pardon me. So this is kind of how it originally shows up. No, it actually gives you little green check marks for the ones that are already in the purchase. And something else that is true that I really like about this is if there is a code that's in the purchase, but not in the chart note yet, let's say it's a, yep, sorry, 97124. Oh, we don't have a 97124 loaded. Let's try a 99204. Okay, great. So we're going to go ahead and add that. When we add a code into the purchase that is not present in the chart notes, Jane's going to let you know. So that's really nice. You open this edit billing code section. It says, hey, just letting you know, we noticed these codes in your appointment were not mentioned in the chart above. Now, that could mean that you as the provider did not render that service that day, and therefore we don't want it on the purchase. Or it could be that perhaps your office uses what is traditionally known as a travel card. That's basically just something when the provider is done with the patient, they give them what they call a travel card with the codes on it that they then present to the front desk so that they can get the codes in the system and charge the patient accordingly. So perhaps, you know, they got up to the front, a new patient code, E&M code was performed that day, but it hadn't made it into the chart note. It's a good reminder for the provider, oh, that's right, I've got to chart this 99204, or I did not perform a 99204. And so that's something to know, that when you choose the codes in this edit billing, we're just going to go ahead and choose all of them. You can update billing and it will override the purchase. So that means that the codes that are in the charts, when you hit that update billing, will override what's in the purchase. So you can see that 99204 has disappeared from the purchase, and the codes that are in the chart have replaced them. So that's good to know, because if you are practicing having your admin staff pulling codes forward from previous appointments, and one of them, you know, is not being used for this appointment, or perhaps there's an additional code this appointment, when you hit the update billing button, it will override what's in the purchase. So we're going to get to a workflow to make sure that you don't have claims going out prior to hitting this button, because you definitely want to make sure that this update billing button is clicked and the chart is signed before submitting the claim, so that you know that the claim is accurate and matches the chart note. So here, like I mentioned before, above, it doesn't matter the order, you just put it in, Jane pulls it down, and down here you could actually reorder your codes. So obviously the order of the codes, not only the ICD codes, but the CPT codes does matter. So that's why it's important to know that you can drag and drop them around. So if this is the primary procedure, I would put that first, and then I would list them in order of how I'm addressing those ICD codes. And then, you know, if I said, well, you know, the segmental and somatic dysfunction of the cervical region was actually the primary chief complaint code, so it needs to be first, I would drag and drop that, so on and so forth. So you can kind of move these around. Also, if you have services, and this does happen quite often, if you have services that you know the insurance company is not going to cover, you can uncheck them so that they are actually not being transferred over to the purchase, and therefore they're not going out on the claim. So let's go ahead and update billing again. and we see it move around on the right-hand side. So I love this, again, because you get kind of the whole view. You have your day view for the schedule, you have the chart note that you're working on, and then you can actually look at the purchase of that patient for that day so that you can make sure your changes are being made and applied correctly. And there are a lot of different ways of going about using this section so that it's working best for you in your workflow. Now, when you do uncheck these services, they are still obviously in the body of the chart notes. So you are charting these services, but you're not necessarily sending them to the insurance company. And you could, there are other ways of handling services that need to be paid out of pocket by the patient that aren't going to insurance. So that's certainly a workflow that we perhaps will get to down the road. We're not going to switch over right now because I don't want to make it too confusing. So let's go ahead and button this guy back up. And then you would just sign that chart as the provider once it's complete and the codes are in there and you know that they are correct. You would sign that chart and that's it. So I adore this section. Before this section existed, it was a little tricky knowing that the codes that are in the purchase were what was performed that day by the provider. This I love because we always want the chart note and the claim to match. That's what the insurance companies want. It makes the most sense. So I love this feature. So that's kind of why I wanted to start here, because I find this to be a really efficient way to be able to make sure that the codes are correct before claims go out. Now, I'm going to hop over to the billing section, but one more note on this is it's really important to have a good established workflow for this. I'd mentioned earlier that you don't want to hit that update billing button after the claim has been submitted, because claims are funny. Once you get that claim submitted, you cannot submit a corrective claim with new codes, different codes, until you actually receive the response from insurance, because you need the claim number that they assign to that claim in order to send and submit a corrective claim. So obviously the best way is to have your claims go out clean, complete, accurate the first time. So the workflow that I'm referring to is we recommend to our clients that let's go ahead and hop over to billing, because that's where we're going to go next. This is the section as a third-party biller that I kind of live in. And we are going to be working in the draft category. So when you arrive the patient, like we talked about, it's important to arrive the patient. It's important to add the policy to that purchase. Those two actions guarantee that that appointment is going to, that purchase is going to end up in the draft category, as long as you've set the draft category to be where those claims go upon creation. And that is, we did it in our first session. Just going to hop over real quick. We'll go into a new tab. Under settings, just as a reminder, under the billing section, billing settings, scroll down, sorry to go so fast, under the insurance portion, set new claim submissions as unsubmitted or draft. We choose draft. Now, obviously that's a per office decision. If you want to just have them go to unsubmitted, sure, do that. We like this method. This is the workflow that I'm going to teach today. All new claims go to the draft category. Okay, so in draft, all of those claims come in. I recommend that the admin team or the providers, whoever is in charge of the claims process, give the provider 48 hours to complete their chart, get the codes into the body of the chart, make sure that the order is correct in the edit billing code section, hit that update billing button so that the codes move to the purchase, and then sign that chart. 48 hours, that's typically the amount of time. It's actually 24 in some states for licenses, but that's typically legally how much time you should have to complete and sign your charts. So that's why we say that workflow is kind of appropriate. Leave the claims in the draft category for 48 hours after the date of service to give the provider time to finish their charts, update the billing, and sign that chart. That way, you know, okay, it's been, this is May 4th, today is June 8th. So hopefully this provider has finished their charts, and we would be able to know, okay, now I'm going to review the claim, make sure there are no missing pieces, and move it, knowing that the provider has put their codes into that purchase. So hopefully that made sense. We can certainly provide a little bit more clarity at the end if there are questions or concerns. So, oh my gosh, we got through the setup. That was all setup, and setup is arduous, right? There's just so much work that can go into setup. The beautiful thing is that once you get through it, it gives back to you every day, right? If you have set up the settings correctly and the insurers and the billing codes and the staff sections, and you've done all the things, this process becomes easier on a daily basis. And that's kind of what we're looking for. The work up front pays back on a regular basis. So let's get into claim submissions. In the draft category is where all of our new claims has arrived. And before we open these claims and look at the content, I just want to bring your eye to the information that we see here in the list. So we have our dates of service, we have our insurance companies, patients, staff member, the state. So the draft is the state, and then the date above it, I think is when we moved it back, because I moved some of these back in here. Procedure codes, diagnosis codes, so on and so forth. Now, just looking at the list, we can see that the procedure and diagnosis codes are missing from quite a few of these appointments. So as a first level review, we would not move those claims to unsubmitted because they're not ready. So let's take a look. We're going to actually look at all the claims, including the ones that are missing codes, even though we know they're not ready yet. So let me just take a breather. We start with making sure there are no unsaved changes, because those can be a thorn in our paw. If we choose the list and unsaved changes are present, it won't let us view the contents of the claims because changes have been made that haven't been saved to that claim yet. So as a precautionary measure, we start with clicking our little unsaved changes box. And look, there's no unsaved changes. So I hopefully will find some in the unsubmitted, but if not, that's okay. They would pull right up here, and then you would just view, and right at the top, it gives you the hyperlink to fix it. So if I find some, we're going to go ahead and look at those, but that's a good starting place just to get those out of the way, make sure that these are as complete as you can possibly get them before looking at the contents of those claims. So we're going to select the whole list. It's going to choose 25, it's choosing 28. Let me just refresh. Sometimes we just refresh and the system kind of resets a little bit, makes it, there we go, perfect. Pardon me. Okay, so we're going to select this box and it chooses 25 claims at a time. That's the batch that it handles. I recommend sticking with it. I originally wanted more, but I really do like the 25 at a time because it's a manageable list to go through, make changes, make fixes, and it doesn't slow the system down. If you do have more in the batch, it's just kind of a slower process when you generate the submission. So I like sticking with the 25. So as a note, so we've chosen the whole list. We're going to hit this submit selected claims button. Now it's not going to submit them by hitting this button, so don't get scared. It's also a view button. So we use this as a way to view the contents of the claim. So let me just kind of give a little bit of background workflow. When our clients are working their claims, they are getting into this to make sure there are no missing pieces. They're not the medical billers. They don't have all the deep knowledge on the insurance companies and what they may need, but they do know when something is missing because Jane makes it so easy for them. So here at the top, actually, the review summary gives you a good understanding. There are only 15 invoices that are valid for generating a submission. And that's because 10 of them are missing something. And Jane will not allow you to submit a claim if there are missing pieces, because she knows that it's going to reject. It's not even going to get it through the clearinghouse. It's going to just stop and say, hey, you've got to fix this. So she'll say, please check below for any missing or incorrect info. And then she makes it extra easy by giving you the red highlighted area and a hyperlink to fix the issue that you need to fix. So for instance, my clients would get in here, they would go, okay, oh, we didn't have We didn't add codes to this. So they would just click on this link and it would take them to a new window, which I love because it keeps the list intact. I like to be able to go back to where I was and be able to get back to what I was doing instead of having the list refresh and so on and so forth. So when I get in here, I can go ahead and add codes. Now, right here is the button that's keeping me from doing that right now. So just know that if you get in here and you're like, where do I add the codes? It could be that you have this little button checked that's not allowing you to do any editing. So, oops, sorry about that. You would just click that and slide right on over, and then you have the ability to add your billing codes. And you can just, you don't need the hashtag in this portion of the software. Oh, here's our update invoices button. So this is actually what the update changes means. This is arrives here. And then you would add your diagnosis. Lower back pain is always my go-to. So on and so forth. You get that done. And then you would update invoices. That way it kind of, I like to say, plants your codes, and then you would go back to your list, and you won't see it refresh yet. You would have to hit the refresh button to actually see those changes apply. So let's just go ahead and hit that real quick. We are looking at Aaron Reynolds, just in case we lose track of him. Sometimes that happens. Okay. Yes. Okay, perfect. And so here's our code. So you see kind of the red disappear, and marked waiting on primary. Anyway, we won't worry about that right now. So anyway, you go through the list, you check for the missing or incorrect info, and you click the hyperlink to fix the information. Now, it could be more than just the codes, right? It could be the insurer, the patient's demographics are not complete, we're missing a date of birth, perhaps, so on and so forth. I call this the first level review. Now, that's not like a generalized, it's not a term that's out there. It's just something that I use. But I call this the first level review because it's really just about going through and making sure that you have all the pieces to the claim included so that you have your best chance of having a successful submission. So, and like I had mentioned before, Jane makes it real easy to go through and just click these hyperlinks, make those changes, and then be able to get everything in there that you need and move those claims. So we're going to go over that in just a second. As a workflow thing, I am the person that's like, if I can do something in 3 clicks instead of 4, that's what I want to do. So I tend to not hit this refresh button until I've actually worked through all of the claims with missing pieces, fix them, then hit the refresh button so it just refreshes everything all at the same time. Otherwise, you're spending a few extra seconds every time you hit that refresh button. And if you're a third-party biller or if you're doing a lot of claims, that adds up at the end of the day. So I definitely like to kind of get through everything, then hit that refresh, make sure that all those changes have been applied, and then I get out of the window. So that's the first level review. I love that Jane just makes it really easy to identify what's missing. Go through, make sure you got no red lettering, no red highlights, everything is complete. Once that is true, we're just going to choose a couple of these guys because we can clearly see that some are not ready to move over. But let's say that these 4 claims are good to go. We've got codes in them. We went in, everything looked good, right? We choose the ones that we want to move to unsubmitted. And then you would click on this selected box and mark as unsubmitted. Now, you will notice that it is awfully close to mark as submitted, which is a way to lose track of the claims because they're not actually being submitted. They're just being marked as submitted. So I always say, take a breath, take a moment, double check that you're on the right one and mark as unsubmitted. That's going to move those claims to the unsubmitted category for what I like to call the level 2 review. And that is on the client side. Now, if you have billing in-house, perhaps it would work out that you have an admin person who is in charge of going through the claims and making sure there are no missing pieces, using those hyperlinks to fix any issues that do come up, checking in with providers if codes are missing, so on and so forth. Just make sure that the claims are complete. There's no red. Once that's true, they move to unsubmitted as a way of indicating they have gone through a first level review and they are ready for their second level review and submission. So let's move over to our unsubmitted folder real quick here. All right, so preferably, we would not find any claims in here with any red lettering, red highlighted areas. They've already been taken care of in the draft category. We are in a demo account. I have not like scanned this account to make sure that that's true. So I'm sure we'll run across some that still have that red. But ideally, unsubmitted would only be that second level review, which is the details, the meticulousness of the claims and the insurance companies that you're working with. So let's filter our results to the primary claims first, just because I want to keep the secondaries a little separate for right now and address them separately. So we're going to just choose our primary claims. And it's good also to know that you can filter these claims. So if you want to work through certain insurance companies all at the same time, we will do that with our larger clinics because, we know that Medicare wants the initial treatment date for chiropractors, or the referring provider for PT, all of the things, right? All of the little meticulous things that they want. So we might work through just Medicare patients so that we can have in our mind, okay, I've got to look for the initial treatment date or the referring provider or what have you for this insurer and go through those. So these filters can be really helpful. You could just work on, I could just be working on Dr. Gregory's claims, whatever, make it work for you. Find the workflow that works best for you. So right now we're just focusing on our primary claims. We're going to go ahead and choose this list. And again, we are going to click on the submit selected claims. It's just a view button right now. And then it gives us the ability to look through and review the contents of the claims. Okay. Now, again, we're going to find some that are red and we're just going to kind of ignore them right now. So we're going to go ahead and scroll down to one that looks complete. Okay. Now, I could deep dive a rabbit hole when it comes to how to review claims and what we're looking for. So I'm going to do my absolute best to keep it just kind of basic and simple and understand that the things that we look for are specific to the insurance company that we are dealing with, the specialty of the provider, and perhaps the region that the provider practices in. So these are all kind of important umbrella things that you may want to take into consideration when I'm going over this. This is a very generalized information. So as a third-party biller, what am I looking for in a claim to make sure that it is complete, accurate, and ready to go? Knowing that a first level review has already been done. So all of the pieces are in here. I am first looking at which insurance company are we working with. A lot of insurance companies like their own things, right? They want the initial treatment date. They want a referring provider. They want specific modifiers. They won't pay for certain services. There's a lot of things. Is this a telehealth visit? Do they need a certain place of service for a telehealth visit with a corresponding modifier? I mean, again, the hole is deep and vast. So the insurance company is going to play a big part in what I'm looking for in the rest of the claim. It's also a good opportunity to make sure that your clearinghouse is set correctly. So if you've made a switch from one clearinghouse to another, your very first step is to go to settings and make sure that clearinghouse has been switched in Jane. So right now we have it set to ClaimMD. That is the clearinghouse that Jane has chosen to integrate with. That's the clearinghouse that's set in this account. If we had been previously submitting to, say, Office Ally and that showed up here, but I knew we were using ClaimMD, I would need to make my way over to settings real quick and make that change. Now, luckily, if I did make that change right now, it will change it for all of our current claims that have not been submitted yet. So that's lovely. So I want to make sure that clearinghouse is correct. Luckily, when I establish that it is correct, I really don't have to look at that on every claim because I know it's going to be consistent. Primary policy. I want to make sure that, perhaps I'm working with Regents Blue Cross of Oregon and I know that they have an alpha prefix. So if 3 letters are not at the beginning of that ID, I might be like, hey, this doesn't look like the right ID for this insurer, so on and so forth. I would move this back to draft. So the way that our workflow goes is if we find a problem child in a claim, we're missing one of those meticulous details that's specific to that insurer, I'm going to move it back to draft, and I'm going to email or set a task for my client saying, hey, we need fill in the blank. So the way that I do that is I drop the menu down for this claim and I say mark as draft, and it's going to move it back to the draft category. Now, an important thing to know about doing this is you can submit claims when they are in draft or in unsubmitted. And while this list is active, while I still have it open, if I were to submit the claims right now, it would include this draft claim. So if you are moving claims back to draft and do not intend to submit it, you would want to get out of the window. And I like to go the extra step and just refresh the whole page. That's just kind of my thing. I just want to be as accurate as possible and make sure that there's nothing that's bringing that back up. And then I'll go and choose primary again. And I know that claim has been moved back to draft for the client to put in the information that I need. So let's go ahead and get back into our list here, and let's go past the ones that are red highlights. Here we go. Perfect. So we are in the primary policy. Patient information, staff member, staff insurance settings, location, that all should be accurate. Any demographic issues in the patient's portion right in here in the claim should have been handled in the draft category, because if anything was missing, it would have shown up in red. And then the staff member, staff insurance settings, location, that's all the stuff that we spent time doing in the settings of Jane, in the staff profile in Jane. All of that is relevant to, there's a reason we went through all of that arduous information to get here, because it all applies to the claim. It all matters to the claim. So we want to make sure it's all accurate. So it's rare that I have to look through these sections of the claim, because they have likely been taken care of. I have likely gone over this with my client to make sure this is correct. And then of course they have the opportunity in the draft category to make sure that this is complete. Then place of service is, I love this. I love that I can change the place of service per claim, because it makes it so much easier for our clients who have specifically telehealth visits. A lot of insurance companies require that you have the 02 as a place of service for telehealth, and then corresponding modifiers. So if I know it's a telehealth visit, perhaps it's in the description of the invoice, I can change that place of service code and then add the modifiers if that insurer requires modifiers for telehealth. So I do love the ability to change the place of service around. I think it's really valuable, and it's a much better option than having to have a location for telehealth. This is so great. So I'll look at the place of service and make sure that that's the right place of service for that client and for the services that they are providing. And then the billing area. This is the most important area for me as a third-party biller, is making sure that the codes are correct, making sure that the specialty of the provider matches the codes, because when we're in the schedule, if you are copying forward from a previous visit, you could be copying, let's say you have chiropractors and acupuncturists in your office. Let's say that you made a mistake and you copy codes from an acupuncturist, even though you're a chiropractor. So if I'm here in the claims and I'm noticing that our staff member, Susan, is a chiropractor, but they are acupuncture codes on this claim, that might give me a pause. I might be inclined to put this claim back to draft and email the client about it and say, hey, it looks like there's a discrepancy between the type of codes that you're using and the specialty that you are. So it's just an opportunity to really scrub this and make sure that it's correct and clean, so that we don't have to wait for a rejection to come back. You always want to make sure, do the work to make sure the claims are getting out cleanly, accurately, complete, so that you avoid delays and rejections, because the insurance company's mottos are delay, deny, reject, keep money in the bank. So anytime that we can avoid giving them a reason to do all of that, very valuable. I would add modifiers. The way that I would add modifiers, because it's not giving me a link to do anything once all the pieces are in, is to actually drop this menu down. And I like to right click on the view purchase and open in a new tab because I like to keep the integrity of my list. I want to be able to come back and be right where I left off, so I'm not having to search for that claim again. Because if I were to just click view purchase, it would change this window to the purchase. So I'd come back and I'd be back at the top. I hope that made sense. So I would right click, open link in a new tab, and then I would go over to that tab and I would put in, I would allow editing, and then I would add my, my modifiers. All right, perfect. And then that's complete. I don't see the update changes button, so I'm not going to worry about that. And then I would just go back to my previous window. And then I like to get out of I don't like a bunch of windows open. So our little tabs open. And then again, until I hit the refresh button, I'm not going to see the change that I made. So I'm just going to keep moving through these claims to make other changes, review the whole list, hit the refresh button at the end. That way it just refreshes everything. And it is important to make sure that you are actually hitting that refresh button before submitting the claims, so that you know for sure that those changes have been implemented before sending everything off. So let me just kind of get my bearings here and make sure that I'm on point. Perfect. Okay. When we're looking through a thing, great, great, great. Okay. So let's kind of scroll all the way to the bottom. We're going to pretend like we've gone through this whole list, because I do look at every single claim and make sure. Now, that sounds like, oh my gosh, you do all that work. Well, you get really used to the work, especially if you are filtering per insurance company and you know what that insurance company wants. It's much easier to be able to go through and just say, okay, those look good, adding the modifiers, so on and so forth. So the work gets easier the longer you do it, of course, like anything, right? So let's go all the way to the bottom. So we've made changes. Everything looks good. We are ready to submit, and we are going to hit the refresh button. So that's going to go ahead and plant any changes that we've made in these claims. And then because our demo account is linked to ClaimMD, it says submit 24 claims to ClaimMD. Now, if you are using a clearinghouse that is not ClaimMD, it's going to say generate submission, because you will be clicking on that, and then you will, instead of view 837p file, you will have a download EDI file. So you would click on that hyperlink to download that submission and then upload it into the clearinghouse of your choice, Office Ally, Availity, what have you. If you have chosen to go with ClaimMD and your accounts are connected, then you can just very easily click the submit button. It will mark all of these claims as submitted, and it kind of collapses them, so it puts them in a little bit of a neater list. And then it gives you the ability to view the file in a text file. You could also choose to go to the clearinghouse to look at it, but it's not necessary. Speaking of which, however, if you have chosen to go with ClaimMD and your accounts are connected, great. We have found this flow to be so nice. It has saved us time to be working with this clearinghouse, and the integration is just working so well. We're so happy with this decision. I wanted to bring up in this webinar, since it is such a new thing, that it is important to go to the guide, and I believe Jane is going to put this in the chat for you to review. It's important to go to the integration guide within Jane and make sure that you have set your ClaimMD account up correctly, so that it's this nice seamless connection. What I mean by that is that ClaimMD has an approved transmit feature, so that when you submit claims through that clearinghouse, it kind of takes a pause and it says, it holds the claims and says, do you really want to submit these? I really love that pause, because there are times where I need to get into the claim at the clearinghouse level and do a little something, add chart notes. If I'm working with Medicare as a secondary payer, there's a little code that I have to change. So I do like that part of the clearinghouse, but just know that your claims will still be held at the clearinghouse level unless you have changed that setting in ClaimMD. So if that's not clear, I totally understand. That's why I suggest that you go to the guide, read through it. If it's still a little confusing, reach out to Jane. They would be happy to make sure that you are successful at this. And also making sure that it's set up so that when you do have a rejected claim, it comes back to Jane. So you don't have to go to the clearinghouse, which is what we're trying to avoid, right? We want to stay in Jane. We want everything to be in Jane. So do the extra steps, go to ClaimMD, make sure those have been accomplished. That way you have a full integration, a seamless integration. I just kind of wanted to bring that up since that's something we've been seeing with our clients is they didn't know that extra step was there. Maybe they didn't read the guide. Really important to make sure that it's set up correctly. So we have submitted our electronic claims. Now, this is just for electronic claims. Paper claims, like if you're sending to an injury claim company that does not have electronic claims, the method, the workflow is slightly different. And then there's secondary claims, which we have filtered out. So let's look at our secondary claims first, since that's a part of that can be part of the electronic claim flow. Let's look at those real quick. And then we will talk about the paper claims real quick. And then we're going to be wrapping up and looking at questions and concerns. So we do have a good example in one of our clients. So I'm actually going to look up Gertrude again. Trude Reyes, perfect. So John of Jane was lovely enough to set this up for me so that I had a really perfect example of one that is not filled out and one that is filled out. So we're going to go ahead and view these. Now, remember, these are secondary claims, right? So you can see right up top, it says secondary claim. This one has missing information. So let's take a quick peek at it. And then just to kind of also point out, you'll see that it says primary policy and it'll have the subscriber information, and then it has secondary policy. So you can see they're both loaded. If you are unaware of this, you do need to add both primary and secondary policies to each of your invoices, in each of your purchases. In the order in which they need to be billed. So just in case that's a bit confusing for some, I wanted to kind of let you know, if the patient does have a secondary insurance, you do want to make sure that both are present on each purchase, because you are sending it through primary and then secondary. All right. All right, water. So here's a good example of a secondary claim that has not had the primary responses filled out in the secondary claim. What that means is when you are submitting an electronic secondary claim, they want the primary payment information on the claim. So they want to know how the primary insurer has adjudicated, has portioned out the payment and the contractual adjustments, so on and so forth. So when you see it like this, it is missing that information. Now, we wanted to have one that was filled out for you because this can be a little confusing, right? You get in here and you're like, okay, well, I'm going to fill this out and I'm good, right? No. Let's go down and look at this one. This one is just really great. So you can see the amount that was paid, the original primary remittance date, and then you have to break down the entire payment. So you have a patient responsibility of a copay, you have a patient responsibility of coinsurance, and your contractual obligations. CO just means that the insurance company has said, hey, this is, we have a contract with you saying we'll pay this much. So this $8 gets written off according to our contract, because we're only going to pay you that allowed amount. So these three amounts and this amount needs to add up to your billed amount. So that it can get a little tricky. It requires you to understand how to read an EOB if you have a physical EOB. Now, the good news is if that you are enrolled with ERAs, electronic remittance advice, so the insurance payments coming back through the clearinghouse, and if you have ClaimMD, it's coming right back into Jane. Jane pre-populates this for you, and I can't tell you how awesome that is. It is so nice because there's so much information here. And if you're really not experienced at reading EOBs or ERAs, this can be confusing. This can be frustrating. So I love that Jane takes this step and actually fills this out for you. In the case that you do have to fill it out yourself, it's nice, come into the demo account and look at one of these, how it's filled out, so that it helps you to understand how to do this appropriately, using this add adjustment if there's more to add, and remembering all of the amounts you're putting in have to add up to the billed amount. So hopefully that helps with the secondary claims. It can be a little tricky. The good news is that they operate the exact same way as the primary claim. So once this is correct and Jane says, yeah, everything is complete, there's nothing, it says claims ready to go, you can submit this just the same way that you would primary claim. So right now, Jane says there's only one claim in my list that I can submit because the other one has missing pieces, and I would just submit that one claim. And it shows you that one has been submitted while this one remains unsubmitted because there are missing pieces. All right. So that's secondary claims. That's how those look. Let's reset and let's take a look at the process for paper claims. Now I say paper claims, but our team never, let's actually go back to primary. I just want to see if we have any, it doesn't really matter that much. So I say paper claims, we do not print anything out in our office. We will print to PDF and we will build a file electronically and use either an online fax service. Some of the insurance companies allow you to email claims, things like that. So those are other options. I always want to push the insurance companies to allow me to fax or email. I do not like sending things via post. It's just slow. It's really easy for things to get lost, so on and so forth. So that's just my method. So it's almost exactly the same process. You're going to go in, you're going to review the claims, everything looks good. Instead of generating submission right now, instead of submitting, I'm going to get back out of the list. And I am going to go back to my little selected box that I use to move claims back and forth. And in my options is the CMS 1500. When I click this, it's going to create a zip file with these three claims on the CMS 1500. So it's on the CMS 1500 form, and I can use that, turn that into a PDF, and then I can go into those patients' accounts, pull the charts that need to go with those claims, build that out, and then I, like I said, I either fax it or I email it. So I would download zip file. Unfortunately, this is kind of where I lose the ability to give you an example because it's difficult for me to download anything and not expose HIPAA information in my computer because I have a lot of stuff downloaded. So you would download the zip file. It would give you the PDFs. You would open those, and depending on your software, I mean, if you work on a Mac, a PC, whatever, there is a way to be able to build the PDF, add chart notes to it. Or if you're old school and you just want to print them out, do that. That's fine. It's your business. So you would download that zip file. I would then, this is our workflow. I would leave my list here intact. And I would say, okay, I want to go to Gabe Castro's. This is for May 26th. I'm going to go to his chart notes. I'm going to pull May 26th, and perhaps I'll use my filter to get that chart note if there's a lot of them, or I will just pull it from here. I would go print and then print and use that chart note to attach to the claim. So you have to build the motor vehicle accidents, workers' comp. Anytime that you have to have a claim where you're attaching chart notes and the insurance company does not accept the claims electronically, this is the method that you would use to do that. You'd build those claims outside of Jane in a PDF version, and then submit however you are allowed to submit to that insurance company. Now, the reason we keep this list intact is because I really want the timestamp. And that is important because I want to be able to review my claims during the AR process, accounts receivable, checking to see what's outstanding and why. I want to be able to go to the bottom of the claim and see the timestamp of when it was sent. So that means when I have my list intact and I'm getting back into the contents, I'm going to say submit 3 claims to Claim MD, well, I guess when it comes to the Claim MD, this workflow would be a little different. My apologies. If you have a clearinghouse that's not Claim MD, we would get that generate submission, so it would plant the timestamp. But if you're connected to the Claim MD account, pardon me, sorry, been talking too long. Then you would, gosh, always happens. I get to the webinar and I'm like, oh, here's a thing. And I'm realizing it now. There are ways of being able to generate that timestamp and have it stop in the clearinghouse. So I would still want to generate it so that I have the timestamp at the bottom of the claim. And I'm going to show you, I'm going to see if I can find one. I did have one that was previously submitted so that you could take a gander at it and see what the timestamp looks like. Let me just find it real quick, guys. All right. And my apologies. I'm just going to kind of scroll really quickly and see if I can. I know that I did put some timestampy guys back in here. So just got to locate them. Should I have written down the name? Sure, definitely. All right, let me just load the whole guy and see if I can find him. Okay, well, we won't spend too much time on it. Let me see if I can view one and submit it. I don't think that I actually can. Let's go to view submission. Here we go. Okay, so if we're at the very bottom of the claim and it has already been submitted, it's going to give you this submission history section. You'll also see a resubmission section and a claim control section. And that's because if we want to submit this claim again as a corrective claim, we would need to choose a resubmission code, and we would need the internal claim number on the claim to be able to resubmit it so that the insurance company knows it's a corrective claim and not an original claim. So when I'm reviewing claims, I am always looking for this submission history to see if it had been previously submitted. In addition, when we are doing the MVAs, the motor vehicle accident claims, workers' comp, injury claims, what have you, then I want to generate submissions so I get this timestamp. So if I'm reviewing these claims later, I know when it was submitted. So I know that it's outstanding. So hopefully that makes sense. I like to have this when I'm reviewing claims for my clients. If I come across the submission history, but I don't have a corrective claim request from that client, I will usually mark it back to submitted, excuse me, and reach out to the client and let them know, hey, did you want this sent as a corrective claim, or was it just kind of in here by accident? So we always do want to be intentional with our corrective claim submissions. You don't want to just send claims back out the door. That's not exactly how it works.